This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, an update on the markets. As we wrap up October, all of the bourses we track here, except for one, are closing the month higher. The EGX 30 has the highest percentage gain, up by over 9%. Top 14 South Africa, Nigeria's all share, and the Nasdaq up by 5.1, 4.5 and 6.9% respectively. Kenya's NSE was the only one to fall. The NSE 20 was down by 3.8%. A month from now, in fact, the bourse will be introducing day trading with the aim of raising trading volumes by at least 50%. We'll have a conversation with the Bourse CEO in about 10 minutes. Across the Atlantic, Apple and Amazon were both just over 2% lower before 16:30 GMT, having about $160 billion wiped off the pair's market cap. Management at both companies are warning of a difficult holiday season to come. Here's what's in your headlines. Protesters in Sudan vow to resist the military coup. The World Trade Organization is tackling COVID vaccine supply shortages by reducing export restrictions. And Libya hosts its first tourist 10 years ever since its unrest kept visitors away. Our starting point of this hour, however, is in Sudan, where the country will reportedly announce a new sovereignty council and prime minister within a week. According to the country's current military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the new government will be led by a technocrat and it will be agreed upon by different sections of the Sudanese people. It will not interfere with the choice of the ministers, the military says. Burhan also says that new members will be appointed to the Sovereign Council, but it is still not clear whether the Prime Minister he ousted this week, Abdallah Hamdok, will assume office once again. But according to General Burhan, the army is currently negotiating with him to form the new government. The military coup leader is facing pressure both at home and abroad to restore power back to a civilian government. Protesters in Sudan, in the meantime, have vowed to resist the military takeover through nationwide civil disobedience, deepening the high-stakes standoff going on there. This is expected to leave the country with no clear path out of a worsening economic and political crisis. The Sovereign Council recently gave a speech announcing a state of emergency and dissolving both the cabinet and the council. CGTN's Ramah Nyang has this report.
On the latest development of the growing political crisis in Sudan, the US president is urging the generals to restore the power to the civilians and release the detained politicians. The general said there is ongoing talks with the Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok to be appointed in his position again. But acknowledged sources close to Hamdok said he declined the offer and insisted to exclude the generals from the political scene. However, many pro-democracy blocs are calling for protests Saturday against the military takeover or any compromisement. Ramah Nyang, CGTN, Khartoum, Sudan.
We're still in Sudan. Planes are flying in and out of Khartoum airport after the Civil Aviation Authority reopened it. Now, the move was expected early on Wednesday local time after a one-day suspension, but it was delayed to a bit later on in the day. CGTN's Ramah Nyang did confirm that operations at the airport are back. The authority had earlier said that the suspension of flights would last at least until Saturday, the 30th of October, but the airspace did remain open to transiting flights. All right, then away from Sudan, the World Trade Organization is now tackling a vaccine supply shortage by attempting to reduce restrictions on exports of vaccines. It's also trying to get manufacturers to decentralize their production as much as they can. The WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala says that there are critical gaps in the international response to possible future pandemics from a lack of a global network and a slowness to fund solutions, particularly in poorer countries. COVID-19 economic recovery and climate change are the two main issues being discussed by leaders of the world's 20 largest economies who are currently gathered in Rome before heading off to Glasgow, Scotland for the UN Climate Conference next week.
Put in global governance, bring out the money to help finance this, especially helping poor countries. We are also saying the poor countries should spend 1% more of their GDP on strengthening their own health systems. So they too have to contribute. Now, I think we need the political will to have this adopted. If we miss this opportunity to prepare for the next pandemic, our children will not forgive us, because now we know the lessons, and we need to learn those lessons. So I'm hoping that the leaders will, have that political will to adopt some of these recommendations for the next pandemic.
Over in East Africa, a report on transparency in Tanzania's mining and gas sector shows that increased accountability is inspiring more confidence in investors. The report covers the 2018-2019 fiscal year, and it was unveiled at a ceremony in the nation's capital of Dar es Salaam, commercial capital, I should point out. Mining licenses are also awarded at that same event to Tembo Nickel Corporation. It will now start to mine the world's largest development-ready nickel sulfide deposit. CGTN's Isaac Lucando was there.
A round of applause to celebrate the granting of a mining license to Tanzanian nickel mining giant Tembo Corporation. Formed earlier this year, the company is a joint venture between the UK's Kabanga Nickel and the Tanzanian government. About 2 million tons of nickel will be produced, potentially earning the government some $7.5 billion and hundreds of locals employed in the mines.
Mnakwenda kuwakilisha mamilioni ya Watanzania.
You are representing millions of Tanzanians. Make sure you do what is right, that you do your work with the highest standard of professionalism to ensure that we get everything we ought to get as a country.
The concurrent release of the 11th edition of the Transparency Report in Tanzania's extractive industry paints a fairly positive picture when it comes to accountability. Investors like Kabanga Nickel, whose mining operations will produce nickel, cobalt and copper metals, believe their ventures will flourish because of it.
We are delighted to be partnered with the government of Tanzania to develop this strategic nickel project, which will create shared value for all stakeholders. This landmark partnership, based on shared objectives and trust, has been set up between the Tanzanian government and Kabanga Nickel to ensure the economic benefits from Tembo Nickel, our partnership, will be shared equitably.
Tanzania's latest extractive industry transparency report points to the government receiving over 9,000 license applications in the minerals and gas sector. Of those, 5,000 applications were successful, with 249 existing licenses being revoked for failing to meet regulatory standards. Mining accounts for about 5% of Tanzania's GDP. The government hopes that by doubling its contribution to the GDP to 10% by 2025, around 1.2 million people who depend on the mining sector will benefit. Through a controversial review of Tanzania's mining laws in 2017, the government now gets a 16% stake in all mining projects in the country. The government argues that changes were made to benefit the majority of the country's 60 million people.
We have put in place a good system of reaping financial benefits, with each side getting a 50-50 split in profits. If you look at the distribution of earnings that we have in place, the government gets 51% and the investor gets 49%.
Last year, gold exports from Tanzania were worth some $2.9 billion. With the granting of new mining licenses, the government hopes similar earnings can be made with nickel. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
All right, then let's start our run on company news with Apple. It's lost its crown as the world's most valuable public company to Microsoft today. As the iPhone maker shares continue the downward slide, Apple took a $6 billion hit to its sales during the fiscal fourth quarter due to a nagging global supply chain problem that really, to be fair, is plaguing a lot of other companies as well. The company CEO, Tim Cook, said the effect should be even worse in the current holiday sales quarter. ExxonMobil and Chevron are plowing windfall profits, thanks to the rise in oil prices, back into share buybacks as soaring energy prices are boosting their cash flow. Exxon will revive repurchases for the first time since 2016. The company says it plans to spend as much as $10 billion on repurchases starting in 2022. Shares of both firms went up in pre-market trading. Still on commodities, Glencore says it expects full-year earnings before interest and tax for its marketing unit to exceed its top end of its $2.2 and $3.2 billion long-term guidance, but it's essentially stuck to its production guidance. The miner and trader reported a 9% fall in coal output year-to-date due to its Prodeco mines in Colombia being suspended and lower domestic production in South Africa. Coal prices have surged to record highs in 2021 due to a squeeze in supply. And Eskom said that load shedding would be suspended from 8 p.m. Friday, easing frustrations among South Africans who've had to contend with a whole range of rolling blackouts. Now, the announcement comes ahead of the special voting weekend and a main election day on Monday. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's on the other side. The Nairobi Securities Exchange introduces day trading from late November. What should you expect? And travellers from the UK to South Africa will be paying more for their tickets as the UK increases air passenger duty. Details coming up next. There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference. Welcome back to the program. You're watching Global Business Africa. Now, East Africa's largest bourse will introduce day trading from the 22nd of November with a view to raising trading volumes which have been in decline since 2014. Some 8.1 billion shares were traded in that year, but that fell by over 40% to just over 4.8 billion shares traded in 2019, before the pandemic hit. Now, the volume of shares traded did rebound in 2020 by around 9%. That said, let's move a little forward. Comparing the first 8 months of 2021 to 2020, the volume of shares traded fell by 27%. The value of the shares traded also declined by nearly 40% over the same period. The market cap of shares at the NSE, however, by end September stood at 2.7 trillion Kenyan shillings. That's roughly $25 billion at current exchange rates. A little earlier, I spoke to David Wainaina. He's the Chief Operating Officer at the NSE. We explored these trading trends and what's driving them. But first, we looked at how day trading was essentially a stepping stone on the path to high-frequency trading in East Africa.
We started this about 2 years ago when we came to you and said that we have upgraded our systems. And ideally, what happened is that we separated the trading and the settlement functions. One of the main objectives of that separation was for us to be able to churn trades at the trading level, and that's what we are calling day trading. So basically, day trading will entail someone coming to the market in the morning and be able to trade on those securities within the same day. So you can be able to churn, and if you profit on it, then that is booked to your account directly. To your second question around who benefits, this benefit is directly to the investors, and all the investors who have CSD accounts at the exchange do qualify for this very significant milestone.
So if essentially you're foreign traders, say for example you're in Uganda or Rwanda, you have to have a CDSE account in order to be able to day trade at the NSE?
Yeah, sure, and that's law. Today you will need to have a CDSE account so that you're able to buy listed securities at the exchange. That is not changing because that is a critical layer of trading just to ensure that whatever you buy has a home, and that is the CDSE account. and the money that you're going to commit to buy has a home, and that is the same CDSE account. So it's a prerequisite to being able to participate in day trading as it currently happens.
Okay, so let's look at this in the bigger in a bigger sense, because I understand there's a 5% discount on offer to entice day traders to come in and take part, to essentially drive up trading volumes. Looking at the last data set that we got out of the NSE and KNBS, at least covering the first 8 months of the year, we're looking at average monthly transaction flows of around 22,600 transactions a month. So how big a jump in transactions are you expecting once day trading kicks in?
Very good question. Now, the expectation, remember, this has been done in other markets, Ramah. So our expectation is that if we follow what has been done in other markets, we have seen markets that have deployed what you have done, seeing in excess of 100, 200 folds. So we expect anything not short of 50% of our volumes once this takes traction effective November.
The volume of shares traded at the bourse and their value as well, that's in the first 8 months of this year. That's down by about 27% and nearly 40% respectively in the first 8 months of 2021 compared to the same period last year. Last year was chaotic. We had a pandemic. We were changing how we do business. What explains the dip in activity this year?
Yeah, sure. You have made the point, Ramah, that last year was a very difficult year. Remember, markets are driven by information, and 30% of our market is from the banking sector. We have your typical 60% being accounted by Safaricom. So what happened this year is that when the banking industry was reporting their financial results, you've seen some improvement, and that has come to really have some price appreciation across the banking stock, and that explains that we may be lower, but if we compare from where we have come from, especially in January, I think we have made some significant gain. I know in January the benchmark index was about 1800. We are now around 1900, so there are around 100 points that have been made. In terms of volume of shares that have been traded, actually from a turnover perspective, we could be doing better because the prices have recovered. So even if the volumes are a bit lower, we are by and large around where we were last year. But in terms of the value that we have created for investors in terms of value, it's a plus.
Now, travellers from the United Kingdom to South Africa and its neighbours will soon be paying a lot more for their plane tickets thanks to a rise in air passenger duty. Long-haul flights, essentially anything flying over 8,800 kilometres, and that includes South Africa, but it excludes most of its neighbours, say Kenya, for example, will be subject to a slightly higher tax of at least 91 sterling pounds per ticket. Here's Angela Coppola with the details.
In premium economy, business class and first class, rates are at least twice as high until April 2022, £180 extra for a long-haul flight. And this will impact the South African tourism market.
This is going to have a negative impact, especially in the world where everyone is looking at their ticket cost in terms of how much they are paying and what extras they are paying on top of the cost of the ticket. If you look, back, we have so many surcharges, that comes on top of the price, and this just increased the price of the ticket coming into, a destination like ours.
At the back of the minds of most tourism businesses is the price of oil and aviation fuel. If that continues increasing, it will be a challenge for long-haul destinations like South Africa.
We need to make sure that the cost of travel is not highly impacted. The worst case scenario here is that you get the oil prices going up, and by 2023 the oil price has gone so high that that $7 increase or £7 increase on the airport passenger duty is then so visible because of other costs that are increasing, and therefore the total cost of travel is just so staggering that people then don't decide to do long haul travel.
Over 430,000 British nationals visited South Africa annually before COVID struck.
It's important that as we go forward for both countries, we really have some sort of an exemption of certain countries like ours that are still on a growth trajectory. We are not the first world country. and some will say we're the second world country, but we need to make sure that, the travel between the two countries is smooth.
While an exemption may not be granted, it's been suggested that the South African authorities can incentivize British travellers. Those travellers brought 9.4 billion rand into the South African economy in 2019.
I'm sure a discussion with the airport companies of South Africa to look into that, and many other players to say, how do we offset that amount of money for the greater good of the country will go a long way. But we will engage with government to see if there is a window of opportunity to offset the cost.
The increase in air passenger duties hasn't been welcomed in South Africa because it provides another hurdle to tourists from the UK. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, South Africa, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, is still struggling with electricity supply constraints, with Eskom still employing quite a bit of load shedding. Essentially, that means that a lot of large enterprises lose valuable hours of productivity. Luckily, though, for beer lovers, SAB has invested quite a bit in renewable energy sources, which it controls directly. The beer giant is now able to run production lines flat out without any interruptions. Here's Sumitra Naidu with that story.
It's a win-win for SAB. Investing in renewables has helped the beer maker reduce its carbon footprint and guarantee that all its customers can enjoy their cold brew, even when they're in the dark.
What a better way to break down a serious barrier to enjoyment than to take less electricity from the grid. We take sustainability very seriously. It is our responsibility as a business and a brand like Castle Lite to ensure that we become part of the solution and not the problem.
SAB has 7 plants across South Africa, and all 7 plants are producing solar electricity. One plant in Johannesburg has just started producing biogas.
This morning we walked through our steam boiler house and our biogas electricity generation plant. And this is where we produce heating energy for the brewery and then also renewable energy from the biogas. On the steam side, we use coal-fired boilers to produce steam. And then we've got a wastewater treatment plant that produces biogas, and we then use the biogas to generate electricity. Using the biogas to generate electricity, it's a renewable form of energy source, and it contributes towards our sustainability goals.
Between January and August this year, SAB generated around 9.7 gigawatts of renewable energy.
Since the beginning of the year, we have already generated 9.7 gigawatt hours of renewable electricity, which works out to an average of 1.2 gigawatt hours a month. This equates to an unbelievable 9,000 tons of carbon dioxide emissions that we have not set out into the environment.
SAB plans to do 100% switch over to renewable energy by 2025. The brewer will slowly reduce the need for Eskom and expects to see a return on its investment in a few years. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
After that particular beer story, we're still in South Africa. The tourism sector over there is breathing a sigh of relief. Cape Town has been voted as Africa's leading city destination in the World Travel Awards 2021 edition. Table Mountain has also gotten a top award as the continent's leading tourist attraction. Here's Julie Shire with that report.
It's been a hard 18 months, but there's good news. Cape Town has just been voted as Africa's leading city destination, and iconic Table Mountain scooped top award as the continent's leading tourist attraction.
It's been a very challenging time for the tourism industry over the past 2 years. So winning these awards on the global stage really does come at a fantastic time for us. These awards go to show that South Africa and Cape Town is a player on the global stage, and it goes to show that visitors are still confident in our destination.
Just in time for the holiday season and to give the tourism industry a much needed boost.
There's a lot that Cape Town needs to do to attract internationals back to our shores. We've got fantastic opportunities and we've got, fantastic experiences for internationals, but we can't stop keeping Cape Town top of mind. We've got to be in the minds of those visitors because we are competing with fantastic destinations all over the world.
Before the pandemic, the tourism industry contributed 3% to South Africa's GDP, providing more than 700,000 jobs.
I think we're still in challenging times, but with each passing month, things feel a bit better. And so going into season as we are now, every bit of good news, whether it's an award, whether it's getting off the red list, all of that helps. So any time that we are mentioned as one of the world's best, it definitely helps everybody in the whole tourism ecosystem.
As international travel resumes, locals are looking forward to share with tourists their prized Table Mountain and everything else the mother city has to offer.
It's very, very exciting. I think whenever I travel, I get a sense of how special Cape Town actually is, how much we have here, the mountains and the ocean and the people and the culture. And it's so nice to see that recognized and to have, hopefully, through this, people come and support the tourism. It just feels very positive.
Winning the award is a good thing. I think this should actually encourage people to actually come share this adventure with us, come see exactly what we do, and experience it, not just watching it on TV. I mean, experience it, which is very important.
This award couldn't have come at a better time. South Africa has finally been removed from the UK's red list, and now it hopes to attract tourists from around the world to bounce back its tourism and hospitality sector. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
On to the Democratic Republic of Congo now. The country's Environment Minister, Yves Bazaiba, says that the country intends to ban all log exports. She says the country will implement other measures to lessen threats to its carbon-absorbing tropical rainforest. It's a massive natural carbon sink. The DRC is home to the majority of the world's second largest rainforest. According to UN data, the country is under pressure to improve its forest management and to curb a high deforestation rate, which has doubled in the last decade. Bazaiba, however, has not yet said when this log export ban will come into effect.
The suspension on all wood exports is already an important measure. It allows us to lower the pressure on the forest. It also allows us to enable natural restoration, but also the reforestation program that we have with all our technical, financial and development partners. There are a number of measures that are coming. We've made a lot of progress in the last 6 months, and we feel these are milestones we are reaching so that in 2030, Congo can be amongst the champions of the protection of the environment.
Let's head up north. Tunisia's new Minister of Tourism and Handicrafts says that tourism revenues in the country were up 7% between January the 1st and October 20th, 2021 compared to the same period a year ago. Authorities in Tunis say that the Chinese market will get priority because it's one of the most promising source markets in the world. Here's Adnan Chouachi with the data.
Mohammed Muaz Belhassan said the number of overnight stays has increased by nearly 19%, while the number of arrivals grew 3% in October. Many countries have removed Tunisia from the red list following the improvement of the health situation in the North African nation.
There are positive indicators on the resumption of tourism activities. The traditional markets are returning to Tunisia. The British, German and Russian markets are very important. They are back after more than 18 months of absence due to travel restrictions. Now all actors in the tourism industry have a clear vision about this sector's future.
The minister declared that Tunisia aims to attract more than 100,000 Chinese tourists. The tourism department is training thousands of Tunisian tourism professionals in order to welcome travelers from China.
The Chinese market is one of the most promising and strategic markets for Tunisia's tourism industry. We are training local guides and tourism professionals who speak Chinese and know the needs of tourists from China. Chinese travelers visit Tunisia to discover its culture, heritage and civilization. They are always welcome in this country.
The tourism recovery has revived the handicraft sector in the country. This sector employs tens of thousands of craftsmen and craftswomen in Tunisia.
Tunisian craftsmen have resumed normal activity as more travelers and tourists are visiting the country's inner regions to discover and buy our items. The lockdown paralyzed this sector. Now we're optimistic.
The Tunisian government is working on the revision of the legal framework governing the tourism sector. This project aims to encourage investment dedicated to alternative tourism and to boost regional development in inner regions. Experts assert that the gradual recovery of the tourism activity after the COVID-19 crisis will help in preserving more than 400,000 direct and indirect jobs in Tunisia. Tunisian authorities adopted several economic, social and fiscal measures during the health crisis to guarantee the sustainability of the tourism industry. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
We're 30 minutes into the hour. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. We'll look at the agenda for African countries ahead of the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow. And Facebook has rebranded to Meta, but what does a metaverse actually mean for you? We'll explore that next.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
All right, then welcome back to the program. Let's run through some of the stories making you headlines at the shower. The United Nations Security Council says it is worried about a number of trends emerging across the African continent. That includes more coups, more conflict, and of course the devastating damage done by the COVID-19 pandemic. The 15-member body shared the concerns at a high-level virtual meeting, which was attended by members of the African Union. The World Health Organization's Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus is set to be appointed for a second term in May 2022 after no other candidates were put forward for the post by WHO member states. He was the only candidate nominated by 28 countries. The European Commission has suspended funding to the World Health Organization's program in the Democratic Republic of Congo over the global health body's handling of a sexual abuse scandal there. More than $24 million has been cut following a recent report that documented sexual exploitation and abuse by WHO staff during an Ebola outbreak in the eastern end of the DRC. Congolese authorities have described the move as unfortunate for the country. And finally, leaders at the G20 summit in Rome are expected to commit to reducing the time needed to develop and deploy COVID-19 vaccines. A draft statement says that they support to cut that time from 300 days to just 100. The statement is still subject, of course, to last-minute changes, but the vaccine commitment, that is expected to remain. That's a run through your headlines. Now, COP26, of course, is going to be dominating headlines for the next week or so let's focus on that. African countries are expected to request rich nations to honour and deepen their pledges to fund the fight against climate change. This comes amidst the COP26 summit scheduled to be held in Glasgow in Scotland from Sunday. Organisers have warned that the chances of averting runaway climate change are dwindling. Well, the nations are set to focus on cuts in carbon emissions to try and restrict global warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But African countries are facing financial challenges in curbing emissions and also adapting to the wrenching impact of climate change.
Today, this promise has become obsolete. It is no longer relevant. And yet, developed countries are still unable to mobilize the funds. Our view now is that we need to go much further. It is not the maximum goal under the Paris Agreement because the agreement says $100 billion is a minimum.
All right, then let's explore exactly what African countries should expect once the COP26 summit does get underway. Londrine Interret is the regional director of 350.org. He's joining us now from Uppsala over in Sweden. Thank you for your time this evening. So developed countries really did not deliver on that pledge to provide $100 billion in adaptation financing a year. And it's not the only thing they've lied about. When it comes to equity and distribution of vaccines, we're essentially seeing them hoarding hundreds of millions of doses as well. So going into COP26, why should African countries take any future promises of funding seriously?
Yeah, there are very evident reason to doubt about the promises or the pledges made by wealthy nations, because if you remember correctly, some pledges have been made before, starting from the Copenhagen summit, where 100 billion per year were promised, but as we know, wealthy countries failed to deliver. They promise, they promise sums, and also some of the commitments that were part of the Paris Agreement are also yet to be materialized. I think the COP26 in Glasgow is an opportunity for wealthy countries to seriously mend their ways and begin to pay the climate debt in terms of adaptation and reparation. I think the moment is not about making new pledges or commitment, but rather increasing and fulfilling the previous pledges, because the situation can't wait. If you look at the drought situation in northern part of Kenya, in the region of Marsabit and Wajir, and you go to Madagascar, you find millions of people who are at the moment on the brink of famine, who can't put food on the table. So this is such a situation which really can't wait, and which require immediate action and not future pledges or promises.
But at the end of the day, Laundry, the fact of the matter is that if these countries made all these fancy promises and they didn't deliver, the fact is African countries are alone in this matter. Because what leverage does a continent have to sit at the table and tell the G20 or the EU or the US and say, look, you guys made these promises, you need to deliver on them? I mean, there is no leverage on the table.
I understand that the power and the balances might not be so equal. When you look at global north versus the global south power and capability to find a right deal. But I think this is also a call on the African leaders to really appreciate the gravity of the situation and raise their tone and their ambition, because they have to advocate for the populations who can be a leader and seeing your population being, year after year, victim of a situation that can be prevented. I think they can also take advantage of an example, inspiration on how the world responded to the crisis. I think the pandemic has shown that if there is enough political will and ambition and action, no matter how the crisis might be dramatic, there can be a way forward. So if the same level of energy, attention, and priority is also given to climate change, I think we won't need to go to another 26 summit, because this is the 26 Conference of Parties. We wouldn't need this numerous summit to act on a crisis whose solution are already known.
Indeed. So let's focus on what African countries can do. We need capital in order to essentially fund the domestic agenda on energy transitions, on forest conservation, on dealing with land degradation. What sources of domestic capital can African economies tap into in order to deal with those needs?
Well, I mean, contrary to some of the dominant narrative, Africa is not poor as such as some people may tend to portray it. I think it's again an issue of looking at what we have already. What are our resources? What can we get from the agriculture sector? What can we get from the forestry? What can we get also from the minerals? And most importantly, making sure that the local citizen, local companies, businesses, and communities are prioritized. Because what has been happening in the last, I think, 15 years is that we have kind of handed, we as Africans, the management of such businesses to foreign companies who have been exploiting and take away that capital. So I think this is the time to make some structural and fundamental reforms to the way our economies are structured and ensure that whatever benefit we have on the ground benefit first to the people and the population in Africa, and not those foreign countries who have exploited and overexploited the resources of the continent.
One last question for you. So coal, of course, is a pariah asset at the moment in international finance. But as we move through this transition period, the fact of the matter is that we do have a population that does need access to affordable energy. And gas is one way of providing that affordable energy. In your view, should gas essentially be treated in the same way that coal is at the moment, or should we approach it with a more nuanced, phased approach? So we say, let's give ourselves 10 years, expand energy access, then after that, we can essentially now start to gate access to gas.
Right. I think, first of all, we have to make, I think, a distinction between some of the countries that have been historically responsible for emissions and Africa. At the same time, that nuanced approach has to take into consideration also that climate impact, human costs, and economic risk of new gas and oil projects mean that basically no fossil fuel should be exploited on the continent, in Africa and elsewhere. At the same time, there is a need for a gradual and equitable approach in phasing out such kind of facility or in the gas industry. So at the same time, countries need to look at what is a realistic timeline to transition away from gas. This is something that shouldn't happen overnight. For countries that are depending on that resource, they have to get the time to adjust, because again, this is an industry which is on which thousands, if not million people are dependent to, and also very important for the economy. But we know it's not a type of energy source which is the one of the future. So it has to come to an end. However, it also needs a gradual time and a managed phase out to be able to achieve that just transition, which again may require a couple of years to happen.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Londrin Interet, Regional Director covering Africa at 350.org. Now, still on the business of energy, ExxonMobil, it is one of the largest oil and gas firms in the world. Its management says the firm does not spread disinformation on climate change. That comes amid congressional allegations that the industry is concealing evidence, deliberately so, about the dangers of climate change. Testifying at a landmark House hearing, the company's CEO, Darren Woods, added that ExxonMobil has long acknowledged the reality and the risks of climate change, and it says the firm has devoted significant resources to addressing those risks.
This is a historic hearing. For the first time, top fossil fuel executives are testifying together before Congress under oath about the industry's role in causing climate change and their efforts to cover it up. For far too long, big oil has escaped accountability for its central role in bringing our planet to the brink of a climate catastrophe. That ends today. Big oil has known the truth about climate change for decades.
ExxonMobil has been engaged in policy discussions related to the energy and environment for years. Our views on policies and its implications have been guided by our understanding of the science. We've been vocal and transparent in our support for governments to implement policies that are cost-effective and achieve the greatest emission reductions at the lowest overall cost to society.
So then, Facebook, as you might have heard if you're anywhere online in the last 24 hours, Facebook apparently has a new name. The US tech giant is rebranding, and it showed off its plans for delving deeper into what it calls the metaverse. Now, the move will add a bit more competition to a sector that is poised to see some interesting growth. Major players, including Chinese internet companies, are currently on an upward trajectory, as they've been investing heavily in such tech. Here's Mark New with this report from San Francisco.
At the virtual event Facebook Connect, CEO Mark Zuckerberg borrowed a line from the late Steve Jobs.
There's one more thing.
That thing? A new name.
I am proud to announce that starting today, our company is now Meta. Our mission remains the same. It's still about bringing people together.
Facebook and its family of apps like Instagram and WhatsApp will still keep their names. But Zuckerberg says his company has a new North Star to follow, the metaverse.
All right, perfect.
The metaverse is an immersive world that combines avatars with virtual and augmented experiences.
From a technical perspective, they're doing a lot of great work, and from how much better the avatars are today, much more realistic. It was, at the beginning, I was struggling to figure out if he was real or not in the presentation. He talked about using the metaverse for work, and so enhancing, if you like, collaboration.
The name change comes after some controversial weeks. Whistleblower and former product manager Frances Haugen released thousands of internal Facebook documents to Congress. The Facebook Papers, as they're known, highlights, among other issues, the social network's potential adverse impacts to the well-being of children and its questionable approach to handling misleading and inflammatory content.
You might believe in the vision, and I do to some extent. I think that some of the, ingredients, if you like, to that metaverse are going to happen and are going to change our lives for the better. But the concern of having a company like Facebook and a leader like Zuckerberg be the one deciding how this is going to be developing is concerning.
Zuckerberg did discuss the importance of privacy.
Privacy and safety need to be built into the metaverse from day one.
He also took a jab at competitors by talking about his commitment to keeping his company's ecosystem open for developers.
Living under their rules has profoundly shaped my views on the tech industry. Most of all, I've come to believe that the lack of choice and high fees are stifling innovation, stopping people from building new things, and holding back the entire internet economy.
I probably know that the only other company that they're going to be competing against, at least to start with, will be Apple. And so that idea of let's be open versus the closed Apple ecosystem.
Zuckerberg says he hopes within the next decade, the metaverse will reach 1 billion people, support millions of jobs, and host hundreds of billions of dollars of digital commerce. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
So then virtual reality is at the core of the metaverse, the next big thing, if you will, on the tech front. But what exactly is the metaverse? Well, think of it as a 3D immersive environment shared by multiple users in which one can interact with others through avatars. Now, in one sense, it might be essentially describing a video game, but not quite. Tsinghua University defines a metaverse as a shared virtual world based on a combination of VR, AI, augmented reality and other cutting-edge tech, which is much more real-like, or much more like real-life simulations that are highly interactive and immersive. So instead of just logging into a browser, browsing something on the internet, posting content online, these characters in the metaverse are backed by your real-life identity and social status, and they can produce their own content directly inside the metaverse or make edits to the virtual worlds they live in. So for example, in the past, a person can create an identity on a platform or in a video game that's completely divorced from who they are in real life. But that won't happen in the metaverse because the two are now going to be much more intimately connected. Now, in the last 2 years, virtual reality experience stores have been seeing a lot of growth in mainland China, with many companies recouping losses from previous years. Industry experts say that VR tech is now set to open new growth frontiers for businesses. Our reporter, Juju, has that story on What's Hot tonight.
We are now at a virtual reality experience store in Beijing called Future Battle, owned by the company Step VR. It has quickly become a very familiar name in the VR sector in China now in recent years. Start from about 10 stores at the beginning of 2020. Now the company has over 150 stores in China across 80 cities. Now let's try experience one of their VR games. It feels really real. If you move, your character will also move. If you bump into someone in the game, it happens in the real room as well. How fun and exciting, right? But VR enterprises in China had incurred severe losses some years ago, despite a flurry of investments.
And at 2015 and 2016, there are a lot of investment into the market. When the technology is not mature enough, the more investment we put in, the more investment that we wasted.
After the first wave, mostly the consumer was a little bit cooling down. If you want to install the certain software, then you even need to change your PC because your PC configuration was not powerful enough to support this kind of gaming.
2016 marked year one of virtual reality in China when the sector started to grow. According to the white paper on the status of VR experience stores in China, only 30% of the over 3,000 VR experience stores across the country were profitable. This year, the top 50 Chinese VR companies released by the World Conference on VR Industry shows that those with annual sales exceeding 100 million yuan accounted for more than half of the top 50 for the first time.
At the time now, I think that's the right time to have the right application, right technology, right product.
Guo Cheng says in the next step, when Chinese companies are able to recreate the five senses, such as hearing, taste, and smell, VR can be applied in much more scenarios.
For example, everybody think about how to train us to escape from earthquake. How can we escape from a fire incident? How can a child learn how to cross the road? We can't put them in a real environment. So our way is that we build the whole equipment, put the user, put the patient inside of a simulated but very, very safe VR space.
The International Data Center says the VR market in China was about $6.6 billion last year, up 72% on a yearly basis. With the country's VR technologies gaining ground rapidly, China's VR market still has enough room for growth. Zhu, CGTN, Beijing.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. We'll ignore oil for the time being, just focus on coffee. It's been one of the better performing commodity asset classes, that we're focusing on so far in the year. At the Nairobi Coffee Exchange, average prices per kilogram in the first 7 months of the year were actually 94% higher compared to pre-pandemic averages of $2.8 per kilogram back in 2019. So quantities of coffee sold, however, that's been moving in the opposite direction. They fell about 27% in 2020. The bulk of the year's sales, though, do tend to be in the first half. So as of now, it's a bit of a toss-up as to whether 2021 sales volumes will be better than 2020's figure of just over 24,000 metric tons. Here's what's coming up next. Libya is welcoming tourists after a 10-year absence caused by the civil war in the North African state.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Nigeria's creative industry is valued at well over $100 million. It now boasts of artists who are turning locally sourced materials into works of art. Some of these works are on display at a recent exhibition in Lagos to showcase some of the best made-in-Nigeria furniture and other home accessories. CGTN's Deji Bademosi has that report on Grassroots.
Every item here is made from locally sourced materials. Most of the artists who are showcasing their work at the eco-design exhibition are young women. 26-year-old Elizabeth Awodu is one of them. She ventured into furniture making last year, and now she's showcasing this unique furniture set made from cut-out pieces of reclaimed woods.
Everything we work together, we put roots together, we put life edge, we infuse it, the abnormality, the curve, the uneven edges, those are what we actually admire. That's what we actually inspires the whole design. So I just look forward to showcasing more of these designs to the world at large.
This piece of furniture is made out of a popular traditional textile material, locally known as ashoke in southwest Nigeria. Beyond its use as a ceremonial outfit, the artist is demonstrating its other utility value by designing contemporary armchairs with the material to create regal pieces that showcase the pattern, color and texture of the cultural Yoruba fabric.
We realized that ashoke was underused. It's just after a wedding, you just throw it away or you just put it in a box. And we wanted a way to show our culture while using things that are still modern and in use, and we use around the house and things like that. That's how it started, and it's blown our minds as well.
While the taste for foreign furniture still endures, there's a growing demand for local crafts, and this exhibition is put together to make a stronger case for made in Nigeria designs.
This really showcases what we have, and we have so much. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many people doing amazing things. So we want to really encourage people to buy Nigeria, and we have a lot, and we should be proud of what we're producing here. I think the government should really try to support and encourage. I mean, the people are doing things, but we need to really have more product designers. But by having that, people can actually export their products out.
For the art sector in Nigeria, the much anticipated future may just be here with these innovations by the young and vibrant generation. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Libya has hosted its first group of foreign tourists in a decade with an excursion into an oasis town deep in the desert. This comes as the government of there is trying to revitalize the tourism sector and changes the public image of the country, especially amongst an international audience. CGTN's Penina Karibe has that story.
White buildings set amid a sea of palm trees. This is Ghadame's oasis, popularly known as the Pearl of the Desert. For French traveller Jean-Paul, he's among the first group of foreign tourists to revisit the oasis following a decade-long war.
This will be the second time that we travel to Libya. The last time was over 10 years ago, so now we came with a group. There are 6 vehicles and 12 people here.
Libya had been mostly off-limits to tourists throughout the 4-decade rule of Muammar Gaddafi. Thanks to an October 2020 ceasefire and a United Nations-led peace process, the first group of tourists was able to visit on a tour paid for by the state.
They are breaking the barrier of fear among the many admirers of the Libyan desert. And now, thank God, things are going as well as we hoped, thanks to the supporters and the good people as well as the state, which deployed all its resources from the tourism and interior ministries. As you can see, the escorts that we have here, there is tight protection.
The goal of this journey is a very noble one. It is to change the idea which European tourists and citizens have of Libya, that it is a failed state and a terror zone. This is the goal, and also to show the world the truth that we, the Libyan people, are decent and peaceful.
The UNESCO-listed Oasis city has unique multi-level architecture with whitewashed covered alleyways. The tourists visited the old city as well as the newer part of town, where a mosque with striking minarets faces modern villas echoing the styles of the old town.
When I knew that there was a group of friends who almost all knew each other and who were ready to go back to Libya with Ali, we said, no question, we will sign up right away. And given the kindness and generosity he has shown and given, there was no hesitation. We will never know how to pay back what he has offered to us.
Khaled Dadera, who organized the tour, says he wants to challenge the idea that Libya is a country in decline. For travelers like Jean-Paul, he hopes this is the beginning of adventures in Libya. Penina Karibe, CGTN.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies for you. So the CFA franc has, of course, been edging up to its lowest point all year so far in the week. At around 567.72, it's about 0.2% close to its 2021 low. Headline inflation in Kenya, the data also came out today, dipped by around 46 basis points, about 6.45%. On a month-on-month basis, the index, CPI, also went up about 0.5 percentage point. We saw a 1.1% rise in the food index, which has a 32% weighting. The transportation index was down by about a third, though. The housing, water, gas and other fuels index that has a near 15% weighting, that was up by about 0.7% month-on-month. Those are your numbers, and that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program. Many ways to get your feedback back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. Well, today's up next from Washington, D.C.